How do weak squares affect chess positional play? Have you ever wondered how certain squares on the chessboard can change the entire game? Today, we will discuss weak squares and their impact on positional play. Weak squares are those that cannot be defended by a player's pawns. This means they can easily be occupied by the opponent's pieces, which can greatly influence the game, especially during the middle game. In positional play, weak squares become strategic targets. When a piece, particularly a knight, occupies a weak square, it can create a strong position. This knight can control important squares and threaten key points. For instance, a knight on a weak square deep in the opponent's territory can be very difficult to remove without giving up material or making other positional concessions. Weak squares also provoke further weaknesses in the opponent's position. When you target these squares, your opponent must commit resources to defend them. This defensive effort can lead to new weaknesses elsewhere, like damaging their pawn structure or reducing the activity of their pieces. Another important aspect is how weak squares limit the opponent's pawn breaks. Since weak squares cannot be controlled by pawns, the opponent often struggles to use pawn breaks effectively. This limitation can restrict their counterplay options and provide a long-term strategic advantage to the player controlling those weak squares. The presence of weak squares also influences both players' plans. The side that controls the weak squares will aim to place their pieces there and build pressure. Meanwhile, the opponent must work to prevent occupation or find ways to neutralize the weakness. This often comes at the cost of making other positional concessions. Sometimes, weak squares are tied to color complexes. For example, if a player exchanges off a bishop that controlled certain colored squares, those squares may become permanently weak. This can have lasting effects on the balance of the position, influencing which pieces are more effective and which squares are safe or dangerous. In practical middle game strategy, recognizing and exploiting weak squares is essential. Players should maneuver their pieces to these squares, maintain control, and coordinate attacks around them. On the flip side, defending players must be cautious to avoid creating weak squares through pawn moves or exchanges. They must contest or neutralize enemy occupation of these critical points. Overall, weak squares shape the flow of the middle game by creating focal points for piece activity. They influence pawn structure decisions and determine the feasibility of attacking or defending plans. Mastering the identification and exploitation of weak squares is a fundamental aspect of advanced positional chess play.